Ethan, 32, is the proud owner of a growing tech startup in San Francisco. His fiancée, Charlotte, that's 29, works in fashion marketing and has always dreamed of a luxurious wedding. They've been together for over 2 years and were engaged just 6 months ago. Ethan's company has been his life, built from the ground up with countless late nights and sacrifices. After years of hard work, he's finally at a point where he can give Charlotte the extravagant wedding she's always wanted, even if it means spending a large portion of his savings, around $80,000. They currently live in a stylish apartment downtown, and Charlotte often talks about how she can't wait to show off their wedding to her friends and followers on social media. While Ethan is thrilled to marry the woman he loves, he can't shake the feeling that something isn't quite right. He's been so focused on building his career and providing for Charlotte that he's ignored the subtle signs of tension in their relationship. One Saturday evening, during a casual dinner party with friends at their apartment, Ethan steps outside to grab more drinks. What he overhears next is enough to shatter everything he thought he knew about his fiancée. It was a regular Saturday evening when Ethan hosted a casual get-together at his apartment, inviting some friends over to unwind. As usual, Charlotte was the center of attention, chatting and laughing with her friends. Ethan, being the gracious host, was busy in the kitchen preparing drinks and food. The evening was supposed to be light-hearted, but little did he know this would be the night his entire world came crashing down. Ethan stepped out onto the balcony to grab some extra beers from the fridge in the garage. As he was making his way back inside, he overheard a conversation that made his heart sink. Charlotte was sitting at the dining table laughing with her 2 closest friends, Sophie and Rachel. From the way their voices sounded, the conversation had already been going on for a while. Ethan, standing just behind the kitchen window, froze as he overheard Charlotte's voice, clearly cutting through the air. "I can't wait for all this to be over," Charlotte said, her tone light, but with a hint of something cold. "The wedding, the planning. It's exhausting, but at least it'll be worth it." Sophie chuckled. "You've got it all planned out, huh? A dream wedding, the perfect husband, and a life of luxury after that." Charlotte giggled, her voice filled with an unsettling satisfaction. "Yeah, Ethan's great and all, but honestly, he's just a stepping stone. Once the wedding is paid for, I'll be free to upgrade to someone better. I've already got my eye on a few potential suitors." Rachel chimed in, her voice dripping with amusement. "Oh, that's genius. You know he's going to fork out the cash for everything. He's too desperate to keep you, Charlotte. He's probably so in love with you, he doesn't even see it." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He felt his stomach twist as Charlotte continued speaking. "And that stupid tech startup of his," she said, her voice tinged with disdain. "It's cute, sure, but it's not enough. Imagine telling people your husband's some tech geek. But hey, he's rich enough to fund my dream wedding, so who cares, right?" Sophie laughed again, and Rachel added, "You're really playing this game well. He doesn't even realize what's coming." Charlotte's voice dropped lower, her tone more serious. "Once the wedding is over and everything is wrapped up, I'm out. I'll meet someone better at some fancy gala or in the city's elite social circles, and I can probably get a nice settlement. 2. Ethan's gonna be so crushed." Ethan stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He'd always known Charlotte had expensive tastes, but this was something else entirely. She wasn't just planning a wedding, She was planning to use him as a stepping stone for her own personal gain. A wave of nausea hit him as he realized how much of their relationship had been a lie. The woman he was about to marry saw him as nothing more than a means to an end. With his hands shaking, Ethan quickly grabbed the beers and walked back outside, trying to act like nothing had happened. He was good at hiding his emotions, but inside, everything was falling apart. Charlotte came over, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "Babe, I was thinking, maybe we should look at more expensive photographers for the wedding," she said sweetly, completely unaware of the devastation she had just caused. Ethan forced a smile, trying his best to keep his cool. "Yeah, sure," he said, his voice barely audible. "Whatever you want." The rest of the evening felt like a blur to Ethan. Charlotte was still playing her part, acting as the perfect fiancée in front of their guests. She even went as far as to praise Ethan's business, talking about how proud she was of his success, all the while shooting knowing glances at Sophie and Rachel. It was like watching a performance, one that Ethan now realized had been going on for far longer than he'd ever imagined. In the days that followed the shocking revelation, Ethan spent every moment meticulously planning his next steps. He couldn't let Charlotte's words go unchallenged. He was determined to make her understand the consequences of her actions, and the best way to do that was to let her believe everything was still going according to plan. As far as she knew, he was still her eager, obedient fiancé, ready to fulfill her every wish. But in truth, Ethan had already begun documenting everything. The wedding expenses, all of them paid out of his savings. The texts where Charlotte openly discussed her plans to leave him after the wedding. The vendor contracts, signed under his name alone. He even started gathering recordings and screenshots of Charlotte's private messages with her friends, revealing her true intentions. Ethan wasn't just going to walk away. He was going to make sure Charlotte felt the full weight of her deceit. Then, a few days later, Ethan overheard something that turned his stomach even more. Charlotte had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she took a shower, and Ethan, unable to resist, picked it up. What he found was nothing short of alarming. Charlotte had been texting with Sophie about the wedding and about her plans for after it. He read through dozens of messages, all confirming her scheme. But one message stood out above the rest. "I can't believe how easy this is. Ethan will be devastated when I leave him, but I'll be set for life. Once I get my influencer status and take my place among the elites, no one will even remember this wedding. It's all just a stepping stone for me." Ethan's hands clenched around the phone as his mind raced. Charlotte wasn't just planning to leave him. She was planning to use him as the foundation for her entire future. The wedding was merely a means to an end, a way for her to climb the social ladder and establish herself in the world of wealth and fame. Ethan felt a deep anger building inside him, but he knew he couldn't confront her yet. He needed to be patient. He needed her to reveal more of her plans, to let her dig her own hole. To his surprise, the next day, Charlotte came home with a huge grin on her face, as though everything was fine. She was practically glowing, excited about the perfect wedding they were about to have. But Ethan, now fully aware of her intentions, couldn't look at her the same way. He pretended everything was normal, but it was all an act. Every time Charlotte spoke about the wedding, every time she suggested something more extravagant, Ethan's mind was a whirl of thoughts, none of them good. He reached out to a few vendors, discreetly explaining his suspicions and telling them to put everything in his name. just in case Charlotte tried to take over the wedding planning once the truth came out. He had to protect himself, and he wasn't about to let her walk away with anything, especially after everything she'd done. But the real shock came when Rachel, one of Charlotte's closest friends, reached out to Ethan privately. She seemed genuinely concerned and admitted that she had been uncomfortable with Charlotte's behavior for a while now. Rachel revealed that she had overheard Charlotte talking about her plans with Sophie, and that she had witnessed her becoming more and more obsessed with the idea of marrying Ethan for his money, not for love. Rachel told Ethan that she was on his side and would help him expose Charlotte for who she truly was. Ethan now had everything he needed: the evidence, the support, and the plan. But the hardest part was still ahead of him, keeping his cool and not giving Charlotte any hint of what was coming. The wedding was still 2 months away, but Ethan had no intention of going through with it. It would be the last act of deception in a long game, and he was about to make sure that Charlotte would regret everything she had done. As the weeks passed, Ethan found himself constantly on edge, pretending to be the happy fiancé while secretly making preparations for the inevitable confrontation. He was a master at hiding his emotions, but the weight of what he was about to do was taking its toll on him. He still couldn't quite believe how manipulative and callous Charlotte had been. What made it worse was that she hadn't shown a hint of guilt. She was still acting like everything was normal, still playing the role of the loving fiancé, all the while scheming behind his back. But as much as he wanted to confront her, Ethan knew he needed to wait for the perfect moment. He had to stay calm and play the long game. His perspective on their entire relationship had shifted. No longer was he the man who was just blindly in love with Charlotte. Now he saw her for who she truly was, a woman who had been using him as a stepping stone to a better life, with no real regard for his feelings or their future together. Ethan spent the next few weeks meticulously putting his plan into action. He reached out to the wedding venue manager, explaining the situation and asking for help. The manager was shocked but sympathetic, agreeing to put the deposit in escrow in case Charlotte tried to take over the booking after he left her. Ethan then turned his attention to the vendors, making sure everything was in his name, and that no one would be swayed by Charlotte's charm or her false story of how much Ethan was controlling the wedding. One day, as he was sitting at his desk reviewing the latest vendor contracts, Ethan received a message from Delilah, Charlotte's younger sister. Delilah, it seemed, had been harboring her own suspicions about Charlotte's intentions for some time. She had seen how Charlotte had treated people, using them for her own gain, and discarding them when they were no longer useful. Delilah confessed that she had always been uncomfortable with Charlotte's behavior, but didn't know how to approach the situation. Now, seeing the evidence that Ethan had gathered, Delilah offered her full support. "I know my sister," Delilah texted, "and I know she's always been like this. I've seen it before. Please don't let her get away with it. I'll help you expose her. She needs to learn a lesson." Ethan felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief because he now had someone on his side who understood just how far Charlotte had gone. Anger because he had allowed this to go on for so long. He thought about how much he had invested in their relationship, in their future, and how it had all been a lie. But it wasn't just about the wedding or the money anymore. It was about standing up for himself, about not letting Charlotte manipulate him any longer. He wasn't going to be her pawn in some twisted game of wealth and status. He was done being the nice guy who let people walk all over him. He had worked too hard to build his life and his business to let someone like Charlotte take everything from him. As Ethan continued with his preparations, he began to realize that the more he documented, the more he uncovered about Charlotte's true character. He found out that she had been secretly filming wedding content for a YouTube channel she planned to launch after the wedding. She had been telling her friends that she wanted a small, intimate ceremony, but in reality, she was already planning to exploit the wedding for her social media brand. Ethan felt disgusted as he saw her diary, where she had written about how she was only tolerating him for the sake of the wedding, but once it was done, she was out. The wedding day was rapidly approaching, and every day that passed brought Ethan closer to his ultimate goal, to expose Charlotte for who she truly was and take control of his life once again. As the wedding day loomed ever closer, Ethan's resolve only grew stronger. He had worked tirelessly to ensure everything was set in motion, everything he needed to finally take control back from Charlotte and expose her true nature to everyone. But even though he had everything documented and prepared, there was still one crucial step left, ensuring that Charlotte would never be able to spin the narrative in her favor. The turning point came when Delilah, Charlotte's sister, reached out to him once more. This time, she offered an unexpected opportunity. She would stand by Ethan when everything came crashing down. Delilah was fed up with Charlotte's behavior, and she was ready to take a stand, not just for Ethan, but for herself as well. She told him, "I know Charlotte, and I know she's been doing this her whole life, using people to get what she wants. I'm done with her manipulating everyone around her, and I'm done watching her use you too. When the time comes, I'm on your side." Delilah was determined to help Ethan not just with the exposure, but with handling the aftermath. She was willing to go public with her support and share everything she knew about Charlotte's manipulative behavior. This was the break Ethan had been hoping for. He now had an ally inside Charlotte's circle, someone who could help him shut down any attempt at a rebuttal. With Delilah's offer of support, Ethan knew it was time to put the final pieces of the puzzle in place. He had spent the last few weeks working under the radar, ensuring that every vendor, every detail of the wedding was under his control. He had already gone through the contracts, making sure the venue, caterers, and photographers were all locked into agreements that would protect him should Charlotte try to take over any part of the wedding without him. His accounts were sealed, and the deposits were in his name. But it wasn't just about the logistics. It was about making sure Charlotte could never walk away without feeling the consequences of her actions. Then, one fateful morning, after another heated argument with Charlotte about wedding details, Ethan finally realized the full extent of how much he had allowed her to control him. He had allowed her to pull the strings in their relationship, believing that love would conquer all. But now, his heart burned with the realization that this was no longer about love. It was about respect and standing up for himself. That evening, he made the decision to gather all the evidence he had meticulously documented and send it to his family, Charlotte's family, and their closest friends. The video recordings, the screenshots of their private conversations, and the emails where Charlotte openly discussed her plans for after the wedding were all included. He attached a personal message explaining everything: the manipulation, the lies, and the cold, calculating way Charlotte had used him. He also included Delilah's statement of support, reinforcing the truth of what was going on. As Ethan hit the send button, he felt a mix of relief and nervousness. He knew that this would change everything. The fallout would be huge, but he was ready for it. He had worked too hard to get to this point in his life, and he wasn't about to let Charlotte tear it all down for her own selfish gains. The truth was out, and Charlotte was about to realize that the man she had underestimated was not just a stepping stone. Ethan was the one who would control his destiny, and he was no longer afraid to take back everything that was rightfully his. The moment Ethan sent that fateful message, he felt a shift within himself, something profound, something that would forever change the way he viewed not only his relationship with Charlotte but also his own life. He had spent so much of his time being the dutiful partner, the man who would do anything to make his fiancée happy. But now, as he watched the inevitable fallout unfold, he realized how much he had allowed his own values, his self-worth, and his sense of control to be compromised for someone who never truly cared for him. Ethan spent the next few days focused entirely on his next steps. He couldn't allow himself to get swept up in the chaos of Charlotte's lies, even though her public meltdown was already starting to dominate the news feeds and gossip columns. Instead, he channeled his energy into taking full control of the situation and, more importantly, his own future. While Charlotte and her family were unraveling, Ethan did something he hadn't done in a long time. He took a moment for himself. He shut off his phone and took a walk by the bay, something he used to do when he needed clarity. For years he had been consumed with the relentless drive of building his business, meeting deadlines, and impressing Charlotte. But now, in this moment of quiet, Ethan felt like he was seeing the world with new eyes. He had been so focused on external validation, seeking approval from Charlotte, from his friends, from his colleagues, that he had lost sight of the things that really mattered. It wasn't the wedding or the expensive dress. It wasn't the social media fame or the lavish events. What truly mattered was his own integrity, his own self-respect, and his own sense of worth. Ethan realized he was no longer the man who had blindly put his trust in someone who didn't care about him. He had evolved into someone who could stand up for himself, who could fight back when he was wronged. For the first time in years, he truly felt empowered. He understood that it was okay to prioritize his own happiness and well-being, even if it meant making difficult decisions and going against the grain. When Charlotte tried to reach him, sending pleading messages and calling from multiple numbers, Ethan didn't respond. He had nothing more to say to her. The woman he had once loved had shown her true colors, and he was done pretending like he hadn't seen it. Every time her name appeared on his phone, he simply blocked the number, knowing that no more words could undo the damage she had caused. Meanwhile, Ethan began focusing on rebuilding his life, starting with his business. He had always been passionate about his work, but now it felt like a true reflection of who he was, a self-made man who had fought to get where he was. He reinvested in his company, made strategic decisions that would set him up for long-term success, and reconnected with the friends and family who had always supported him. They had witnessed his struggle and had never asked for anything in return. Unlike Charlotte, they loved him for who he truly was, not for the status or wealth he could provide. As time passed, Ethan found himself more content than he had been in years. He didn't need a big wedding, and he certainly didn't need Charlotte. He had learned that the most important thing in life was being true to himself and never compromising on his values. Ethan had never imagined he would find himself in a situation like this. The woman he had planned to spend his life with had turned out to be someone he barely recognized. But instead of crumbling under the weight of betrayal, Ethan rose stronger, more self-assured, and ready to face whatever came next. He realized that sometimes life's greatest lessons came from the most painful experiences. What Charlotte had attempted to do, to use him, to manipulate him for her own gain, had opened Ethan's eyes to the importance of self-respect, integrity, and true love. As the days passed and the drama from the wedding day continued to unfold in the media and among their mutual friends, Ethan found himself feeling oddly liberated. The whole ordeal had felt like a dark cloud hanging over him, but now that it was gone, he could breathe again. He was free. Free from the emotional chains that had bound him to someone who had never truly cared for him, and free from the expectations of others that he had so often tried to live up to. Ethan's journey was not just about exposing Charlotte for the person she truly was, though that was a necessary step in his healing process. It was about reclaiming his own life, his own path, and his own happiness. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone, least of all to Charlotte. The truth had come out, and now Ethan could live with peace of mind, knowing he had done the right thing, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been deceived by Charlotte. The fallout from Charlotte's manipulation was swift and severe. Her once glamorous plans came crashing down. Her parents, who had been swindled into backing her wedding with their own money, now had to deal with the financial ruin she had caused. Her friends, once so loyal, now saw her for what she was, someone who would lie, cheat, and exploit anyone to get what she wanted. Even the rich man Charlotte had hoped to pursue after the wedding backed out, having seen all the evidence of her duplicity. Charlotte's world, which she had so carefully constructed, was in shambles. But none of that mattered to Ethan. What mattered now was his future. He didn't need to carry the burden of Charlotte's actions. Instead, he focused on the opportunities that lay ahead. He poured himself into his work, knowing that his business was thriving without the toxic influence of someone who had only ever seen him as a means to an end. His family was proud of him for standing up for himself, and his friends supported him through it all. Ethan also learned to embrace the idea of self-love. He no longer sought validation from someone else or depended on others' opinions of him. He had always been enough, and now he truly believed it. He took time to rediscover hobbies, passions, and friendships that had been sidelined for too long. Whether it was hiking in the mountains, enjoying a quiet dinner with friends, or simply spending time reflecting on his journey, Ethan embraced every moment of peace and joy that came his way. In the end, Ethan understood that the true reward wasn't getting back at Charlotte or proving a point. It was finding peace within himself. He had been tested in the most difficult way, and yet he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined to live his life on his own terms. His story wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about personal growth, resilience, and the power of moving forward. And in that, he found his greatest victory. Ethan's journey is a powerful reminder that, sometimes, the people we trust the most can betray us in the most painful ways. However, the most important lesson here is that no one should ever be allowed to exploit us for their personal gain, especially when it comes at the cost of our self-respect and integrity. It's easy to get caught up in pleasing others, especially when we want to believe the best in people. But Ethan's experience shows that we must prioritize our own well-being and make sure we are never compromising our values for someone else's selfish goals. The true measure of strength doesn't lie in how we handle good times, but how we navigate the difficult ones. By standing up for himself, Ethan not only exposed Charlotte's manipulations, but he also reclaimed his power and set the stage for a future built on self-love and personal growth. In real life, this lesson can be applied to any situation where you feel exploited or manipulated. Whether it's in a relationship, a work environment, or among friends. If you find yourself giving more than you're receiving, it's essential to reassess the situation. Set boundaries, prioritize self-respect, and don't be afraid to walk away from toxic situations. By doing so, you not only protect yourself, but also open the door to healthier, more fulfilling relationships.